This is Passion for Your Passions, a podcast where we talk about our passions, both the present obsessions and lifetime goals. I'm Julie.
And I'm Krista. And today, beep, beep, Julie wants a sheep. So, what I gotta talk about this week is I have to talk about Great British Bake Off, which I know I am not on the time because I'm not even talking about this season of Great British Bake Off. I'm talking about the last season of Great British Bake Off.
I haven't watched the current season yet.
Okay. Did you watch the one that happened during 2020?
Yes.
Okay. I just finished watching that one. And I
Have some feelings, do you?
Yeah, that season probably annoyed me almost more than anything. It's really rough, guys. That's probably one. Okay, I don't want to say that that's the worst thing about COVID because obviously the death and dying and destruction.
Obviously, that's insensitive.
that's bad. But
they ruined my show.
Well, it's not that. It's that nothing is happening. Like, there's nothing to look forward to. There's, like, nothing new occurring. Essentially because COVID, things can't be produced as quickly and this and that. So, like, one of them is basically no video games are coming out. One of them is TV shows aren't really coming out. And the ones that are coming out feel really weird. Or same with movies. I've seen, like, a couple movies that have come out during COVID times. They always feel a little bit weird. Like, they were not fully produced to the highest of their capability. Like, that was kind of how... I don't know, actually, if you saw it. Did you see Shang-Chi? It's not a bad movie, but, like, you can tell. There's definitely a few scenes where you're like, yeah, you didn't have, like, the best time doing this. You didn't have as much time to do, the technical stuff, I guess, is the way I would put it. Anyway, getting back to Great British Bake Off. So, I really like Great British Bake Off, but there are two things that really annoy me, and I just need to grieve this to people. So, one of them is, and I have heard two sides of debate for this, so I'm not, like, super strong into this, but I don't really like technicals, and I can see the argument for them. It's just, I think for me, it's more, I don't like the way that they do them, because sometimes it feels unfair. Like, sometimes they'll give them a challenge, and it's like, it's not really stuff that they should know, or stuff that, like, you necessarily would know as a baker. It's like, if you've never baked that very specific thing, you're kind of screwed. So, like, I think one of them that came up this season that I felt that way about was the thing where they put the lemon in the thing.
The pot pie that no one would fucking eat anyway.
Yeah. That one to me was just like, that just felt so mean. Because it was like, who the fuck would take a whole lemon and put it in a pot pie, basically, as Julie described. Like, the way that they described it even, I was like, how can this taste good? This is the weirdest thing to me. Anyway, that's kind of how I feel about technicals. Like, I think if they did technicals in more of a specific way, where it was like, hey, take these concepts and, like, learn from your concepts and, like, core things and have that be unknown, I could understand it. It's just more of the times when they're like, here's this really weird, obscure thing that you will have never heard about at all.
Here's this Jewish pastry from like 200 years ago that no one even eats anymore. Isn't it cool?
Go and bake naan on an open fire. Why? Why would you do that?
Yeah, I get it to a degree because it separates people who can learn and adapt versus you get a whole week to plan this dessert. Like, anyone can plan and practice and do, but it's another thing to be, like, thrown a curveball. I think what would be a better version of a technical is to give them a recipe that could be improved upon. Like, you know how Ratatouille did it with Ratatouille? Like, this recipe's shit, like, but you want to keep an idea of it and improve upon it. I think that would be a smart way, because then they could still use the skills they're comfortable with and also, like, reflect what they've learned and how they progress, because maybe they weren't so comfortable with, like, meringue shells before, but now they're using them, like, in this variation of creating a perfected recipe. I think that'd be a smarter way to do something like a technical.
Yeah. No, honestly, that's probably the best version that I've heard of that. Like, take things that are already classic or whatever and just be like, hey, make your best version of this. And, they still wouldn't maybe be given time,
No, they
to,
wouldn't.
like, learn it or whatever. But it's like, hey, you're going to have to make a trifle or whatever.
I still like
make
the
your
idea.
best version.
Sorry. I still like the idea of it being unknown until that moment. Like, you have right now to think of this. You don't get to practice it. You don't get to come up with some elaborate thing over, like, a week. Right now, in this moment, act under pressure. I still like that.
Yeah.
So.
Because to me, too, I guess, like, one of the other things I was going to point out about technicals is a lot of times what happens, and this is part of the reason why I don't like it and it feels unfair to me, is, like, either nobody knows what the hell they're doing at all and it's just a complete crapshoot, or nobody knows what the hell that they're doing and it's a complete crapshoot except for one guy has made it before. So, of course, they do the best. But, like, everybody else basically sucks at it. That's pretty much what happens every single time. And it's like, this is really not that interesting to me. Like, it's not cool to, like, sit here and be like, yeah, this guy made Jewish bagels before. Like, he specifically learned how to do that for some, whatever the reason was. He had a passion for it. It's like, okay, that doesn't really, like, tell me that he knows how to do this under pressure. It's just he was lucky and he did that specifically.
Yeah, I understand the idea behind it because as a baker, I get what they're trying to get you to do. Because I know when I read a new recipe, I will know exactly what they're trying to get me to do. And 9 times out of 10, they're telling me the wrong way. And I know that because I've done that particular thing. I've made a custard. I've made that kind of dough however many times. And so they're trying to instill that. But instead of doing that exactly, they just give you a really vague recipe for something nobody knows. And so, yeah, it'll have techniques that's like, why the fuck would I know that? It's like, well, you're supposed to figure it out when I tell you this handful of obscure things that obviously you have to wait for it to bubble and wait for it to do resting periods and, like,
yeah.
And like to what you said, they're so obscure. It's not stuff you're just gonna know from other recipes. It's like this very specific weird thing.
Yeah, like the thing with the lemon, because nobody got the thing with the lemon right because they didn't put it in for long enough. And it's like none of them. It's like, why would they know? Like, how would you do this? Like, you basically had to steam it for like 2 hours to make it do the thing that they wanted it to do. And it's like, why would they know how to do that? Like, I don't feel like steaming bakery goods is like a super common thing, especially not doing it with a whole lemon inside of it. So, like,
well, the other part of it is like, they don't always go to other cultures. They tend to stay with the white people, as I'll put it. They almost always do stuff that's like French or like Jewish or British, like those kinds of things. I would be more interested in seeing them trying to do like a Japanese dessert because that is different technique that you have to try to infer upon when you read the recipe. That there is a lot of steaming with Japanese baking. And so they imply that you're supposed to know these things without giving you the setup before. So it would make more sense if like their opener would be, hey, make a Japanese steamed bun and put your flavors in it or whatever. And then the next technical will be a steamed dessert. Like using, like the idea is you're supposed to pick up on that and use it in the next technical.
Yeah.
To make sure you learned it and you could do it with a recipe you didn't create.
See, Julia knows what I'm talking about. She gets what I'm trying to say. She puts it into the baking words. Okay, second part of this, because I have to talk about this second part, because this was actually the part that really annoyed me. The technical thing is just a thing I've felt for a long time.
I'm waiting.
I do not like how sometimes they will pick who wins and who loses, because there has been several times where they have picked somebody over somebody else who was clearly the better baker.
You're preaching to the choir, okay?
I cannot tell you how much that annoys me. And I get, there's a part of me that gets it. Like, I think the purpose of it is, like, Great British Bake Off is, like, not supposed to be so serious. And, like, you could make that argument for that's the reason why they're doing it. Like, they're not trying to, I don't know, be like this toxic kind of whatever where it's like cutthroat, you know, get to the, like, it's just like people baking. You have a good week, you have a bad week, this and that. But like, my whole thing is when I watch these kind of shows, I want to watch people who are good bakers continue on and have a chance to win. So when you have a really good baker and a really bad baker, and you choose to cut the really good baker and keep the really bad baker and keep them for week after week after week. It drives me absolutely bananas. And so this season was probably the worst example of that. This season, like, it was pretty much exactly what I said. There was like a really good baker. And to be honest, I don't even really think she did that bad during that week. Like, she didn't do as good as she had been doing like in the past week. She had like a couple of mishaps or whatever, but like I think they still generally liked her stuff. It's just they were like, oh, you didn't do as good as you have been doing. And then the other girl, I think she didn't do very good either. And I was so certain. And I think by that point too, I was already like pretty pissed with this particular person because like she had already kind of gotten through a couple times, and I was like,
it was like
no.
Every episode she was at the bottom two. And you're just like, it's this week. It's gotta be this week. You gotta go. And then she never fucking did.
Yeah.
And I get why it happens. And it's because until the last competition aspect, they have to go by that week. They can't think about the past. Unless it helps them. And that's why it makes me mad. Like, you either do or you don't. Like, they should see the growth. They should see people, like, progress. But what would happen with her is, let's say she was always at a 60%. Every week, she was consistently okay. Like, I guess didn't totally fuck up, but didn't do anything that anyone really liked. She was always at 60%. And what would happen is, one person would be at 50 that week, and they cut the 50 instead of her, because they're not supposed to reflect on the past weeks. But really what they're saying is they're not going to reflect on the past weeks or the people they like. And that just, I do not do like baking. I did like a short baking competition with like friends of friends, and competition, I don't give a fuck like about friendship or about whomever. I don't care what it is. It's not fun. It's a competition. Like, that's just who I am. And so, like, even if you hate coconut or hate, like, some flavor, you shouldn't be a judge then. Or you should be able to subject from that and say, like, I'm not a coconut fan, but I can tell XYZ, you did a good job.
Right.
And with, like, personal local ones, that never happens. There's always some motherfucker who's like, oh, I don't like almonds, so I hated your whole dessert. Like, well, then get the fuck off the, like, contest stand. Like, clearly... Yeah. Not to be conceited, I crushed the competition, but because you didn't like this. And so that's reflected kind of with the hosts bonding with them. And it was so much worse in the 2021 because they're living together. They're like constantly around each other, and they really liked that contestant. And to be fair, I can tell she probably used a lot of flavor. And that's something that a lot of people in the Great British Bake Off struggle with. They don't want to be too overpowering. Or they use the same kind of mellow flavors, while she was using like American flavors, like strong chocolates and like. So I get why they liked her, but that shouldn't fucking matter. Like, she was always underselling, always inconsistent, but she just kept getting lucky where one person would just be like 10% worse than her that week, and so they cut that person, and it was.
Yeah, and that one too, the one that I'm talking about, which if people have watched this season, they probably know what I'm talking about. That one was, like, particularly heartbreaking because, like I said, I don't even think that she did that bad. It was basically, like, she didn't do as well as she had the other weeks, and that was
You're talking about
cut her.
The person who I basically, that's me. Like,
yeah.
She was what I would be doing half the time, and I think it was, like, the chocolate one. I think, like, the big chocolate showstopper that she got kicked because she just, like... Every step of the way, she had something bad happen with her bake. And the other woman just made it by the barely... Like, she would have been kicked if our favorite essentially was just, like, one step ahead. Like, just had a little bit higher. Stupid.
It just... I really, like I said, there's a part of me that understands why they do this, because they don't want to be cutthroat, or I don't even know if that's the reason, to be honest with you. I'm just assuming that's the reason, but, like, I don't like it. Like, I want to see people who are good at baking continue on. And this has happened in other seasons. Like, there have been other seasons where they have cut people who I really liked or I thought was good bakers or at least interesting, and then kept people who were just not doing that well. And, like, they continued even, like, after that to not do that well. And it's like, look, like, I understand I get it to a certain degree, but like, I don't want to watch this person who's not doing very well. Like, it's really not interesting to me.
I think the main reason, besides whatever personal conflicts they may or may not have, I think the main reason it's designed this way is because the idea is they're looking for the best all around baker. And so they don't want you to have a weak point at any time. And that's their way of also equaling the playing field, is that you might be good at breads, but I'm great at, like, chocolate. And so there'll be an episode about bread, there'll be an episode about chocolate. The reason why it doesn't work, though, is if we're in the final 5, and I have smoked you the entire fucking time. I've been number 1, star baker. But this week, it happens to be bread, and I'm not that good at bread. I can get kicked just because I ruined, like, one bread, and maybe you were just okay and barely struggled along, but because, like, it was so many people, you just always got by. And now that bread is your thing, you got the star baker, and you win the show, when really you just had good luck on the timing of when your hot moments came. Like, that's... So I get why they do it. They're trying to make it, like, fair in that they want to find the best all-around baker. But then they should reflect on the past or don't at all. That's what...
Yeah.
That's the kicker.
That's also weird, though, too. And I mean, you know, we should probably move on here soon. But
we stopped doing story time because it took too long, and here we are.
I know, but I was very passionate about this. I needed to talk about it. But they also make a really big deal about growth. So it's
what I'm
just
saying.
Confusing
like,
to me.
Conflicting. And it seems like they only use it when they're personally attached to somebody.
Yeah.
And they should either use it or don't. Like, that, it shouldn't be these, like, half measures. And I'm perfectly okay for them waiting till the end to use it. But then, yeah, they can't say, well, you haven't changed every week. What's that fucking matter? That's not the point. Like, you purposely made that not the point unless I make it to the top 3.
Yeah, I personally think that they should look back and it be kind of like, look, like, you've been struggling. You just, like, have not improved, basically. That is more the argument that I'm looking for. Like, if you've been there for, like, 4 weeks and you've shown no improvement, and, like, again, it's like that situation where you're neck and neck with somebody. It's like, pick the person who's doing a good job. Like, don't pick the person who has, like, not improved at all, basically. That's not interesting to me. Like, I don't want to just watch a person struggle. Yeah. I don't find that interesting.
But I think what would be an interesting take is the first 2 episodes cut 2 people. Like, the 2 people that just, like, right off the bat, you're like, shouldn't have picked you. There's always at least one that you're like, oh man, like, that was rough. Or, like, 2 or 3 do that, and then just have, like, everyone's name on a scoreboard and, like, put them in order. And as people improve or get worse, just, like, instead of having the talk where, like, this is the star baker, they'll just walk up to the board in silence and just shift people around.
In complete silence.
In complete silence. I think that'd be so much better. Like, just harrowing. Like, they don't have to say a goddamn word. They could just shift names, like, and then just walk away. Like, they don't say why, and everyone has to figure out, like, shit, I went down, I have to practice. Just give everyone 10% more anxiety.
I feel like that's the title for this episode. Just give everyone 10%
more anxiety. And then when you're, like, halfway through the season, cut the bottom 2 and just keep doing that shit. Until you're down to, like, 3 or 4 people, and then be like, here's your scorecard of why we kept, like, your percentage over time and stuff. You get your history packet.
Beep, beep, I'm a sheep. I said, beep, beep, I'm a sheep.
To your breed, your feast, your blind true. Sheep be true, around you.
So Julie wants sheep. Julie wants some sheep, guys.
Sheep.
That's enough about Great British Bake Off. I had to get it off my chest. It took too long.
Fine.
But it's fine.
So this episode's about sheep people.
Yeah.
Well, not people that are sheep.
There are sheep in the Great British Bake Off.
There you go.
So.
There's also cheese, which can be made from the milk of a sheep. So.
Yeah, there's a few cheeses that make sheep. But today, we're
cheeses
here...
that make sheep? What? What'd you say? What's happening? I'm just confused.
They just form into the shape of a sheep.
That's how sheep, when they pass away, instead of decomposing, they turn into cheese.
Because sheep have great flocking tendencies.
You're supposed to say that in the opener. Missed your moment.
Because sheep have great flocking tendencies. You put the cheese sheep out in the field and then they all just flock to him.
What are you talking about? What is happening?
Sheep have good flocking tendencies.
Okay, you keep saying it. It's not.
If you have one sheep, that sheep is unhappy. It will show signs of depression. You have two sheep, the sheep will show signs of depression.
You're still depressed.
When you have three, they're far happier and they're not depressed anymore.
Okay.
So if you ever need to do a scientific study that has to do with flocking, sheep are the best for this.
All right.
That's it. That's my first fact.
That's your thing.
My first fact. So, look, let's get back to the topic first.
I think so. Let's get back to Great British Bake Off. Like, what?
Yeah, we're talking about cheese sheep. No.
Cheese sheep.
Such
Dairy sheep. God.
Such only one sheep, guys.
And Kristen knows a ton about this topic, clearly, since she knows they're called cheese sheep and not dairy sheep.
No.
Yeah.
Julie wants sheep, and she has kind of an ongoing farm situation. So she's going to talk about why she wants sheep. What reason? What she's going to do with these sheep. How it will be to be a person with sheep. And I'm going to, just generally ask her questions and probably also have facts randomly. I don't like the face that you're giving.
We're off to a great start.
This is the episode, guys. We're going to make you,
Can you tell it's nighttime here by our behavior?
And that sheep was a really hard episode for Krista. Because basically she tried to make the outline and was like,
yeah, she just kind of wrote our names repeatedly. Like,
I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to talk about. I don't know shit about sheep.
I tried to do an outline that included her, and she just still decided, like, no, this is you. Just kind of stopped, didn't write in her comments or anything.
I found facts. I found facts that I can just throw in while instead asking you about sheep. So, Julie, what are your feelings about farms and sheep and everything in general? Why do you want this?
A+. Yeah. So I'll start with kind of my current experience and note that as part of how I walk through life, I don't know if it's because I play video games or because I'm competitive or because I'm ADHD, but I think of my skills and my goals in task leveling form. And so because I farm to a degree, I feel like I have to keep leveling that skill up. And I've never had livestock per se. Growing up, I had chickens, but anyone who's had chickens knows that's pretty low on the pole of responsibilities for animals. And I mean, I had pet rabbits and pet dogs and things, but I figured I should probably level up a bit because I like homesteading, I like being at home. And as usual, my mom had a weird random influence because she's just a weird person. And I don't know, as we've mentioned before, I don't understand my mother's train of thought half the time. Or why she says the things she says. But one of the things she said specifically about me is that she could see me making cheeses because I like touching things. And I'm like, you're not supposed to touch. I'm like, what does that even mean? And it's because she watched a documentary about making cheese, and it shows them tying mozzarella or checking the surface of feta cheese and stuff. And so she's like, I think you'd be good at that because you like touching stuff. Okay, Mom. That's all right.
That is just a weird thing to say.
It is. And then when I thought about it, I'm like, I do like touching things.
Maybe I will make cheese.
Maybe I will make cheese. When I go through department stores with clothes, I have to touch all of the clothes. And I do that. I like soft things. And I have plants specifically because they're soft. I guess I'm weird. But, so I was like, okay, I want to make cheese. I need something that produces milk to do cheese. And so I started looking into the three main animals that produce milk to make cheeses. And that would be goats, cows, and sheep. And I essentially found someone who had the same line of thought I did on, like, what one do I want? I know I want milk. Like, literally the same vein of thought. And she did this whole, like, 10-page thing where she tried the milk of all three and worked with all three animals and wrote, like, a whole chart about the pros and cons of each and, like, what everything does. And I found out that sheep's milk is the easiest to digest. It's the sweetest. And that the cheeses you make from it tend to be my favorite cheeses. They're like feta cheese, Romano, ricotta. I use those a lot. And so to me, it just made sense that I would go that way. And then I thought about goats, because I do love goat cheese, and people always tell me to get goats because they think they're cute. But those bastards will undermine you at every turn, and I don't need that kind of stress in my life. So with sheep, you can just put a board in front of them, and they're like, oh God, and they just, like, turn around. Like, they won't cross it. They're very just docile in that way, where they're like, nah, like, that seems like I'm not supposed to go there. Well, if you put an electric fence up with spikes on it, a goat's like, that's a challenge that I'll take. Like, it's... And obviously not every sheep is completely like that, or every goat is completely like that, but that's generally where they tend to go. So I picked sheep specifically because of that, and then I knit, and I use yarn, and to be completely honest, the main reason why I wanted sheep is because Babe, the movie, is like what I want my life to be. And I watch that movie like once a month. That is one of my favorite movies. I'm just like, this is the dream. Like, this is what I want. Like, this exact thing. Like, I want it to be my life. And so I think that's really why I decided on sheep. That's just the next level to me. Like, it's not even that I want that to be my career path or that it's going to be my whole life goal and everything. It's just the next level of what I do farming-wise.
Well, just remember, Julie, that sheep have square pupils, which means that they can see behind them, so you will never sneak up on your sheep. Never.
They can be pretty skittish. If you don't bond with them, you'll never be able to milk them. They'll be terrified of you. Like, all right.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I have a whole bunch of facts, but, like, one of the facts that I saw was apparently, like, sheep are very smart, which I think a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah.
They're, like, about as smart as pigs, which pigs are kind of known to be one of the smarter animals. And apparently, like, they remember faces for years.
Mm-hmm.
It's, like, not even just, like, like, I saw a face 1 month ago type. Like, they'll remember you, like, for years, so...
Yeah. And they have a range of emotions. I don't get the hype with cows online. They're the dumbest fucking animals, like, and they're huge. So it's just tenfold that you're just like, oh my God, get out of the way. Like, I don't understand. They don't have emotions, but sheep do. And goats have a lot of rage. So, like, I get that a lot more. But yeah, I kind of assume sheep are dumb. I will blame Babe for making them dumb. But when I was reading the same facts probably about, like, their range of emotion, that they can be bored. They can be depressed. They can do all these things that, like, you don't really associate with sheep. You're kind of just like, I mean, what's your lifespan anyway?
Oh, yeah. One of the ones that I saw on here that I thought was really interesting was that apparently sheep will self-medicate.
Yeah, they'll eat herbs that make them feel a particular way or to solve, like, a toothache. Yeah.
So that's
just like, what?
yeah, they know that. I mean, I guess, they're putting so much grass in their mouth, they probably...
They could just decide on differences. Yeah.
They're like, whoa, did you eat that one
Did you
grass?
eat that shit? I feel great.
You should go eat that.
Go eat it, man. Like, you said your teeth was hurting. Go fucking eat that.
Eating some poppy flowers. You're like, I got high.
High as shit.
And I mean, like I said, sheep have high flocking tendencies.
Oh my God. That's the title. Okay. Just like, sheep have high flocking tendencies. Just like in all caps.
So I was like looking through these facts while you were talking a little bit, but I was paying attention.
What am I, your teacher?
I was paying attention.
Yeah.
I promise, while I was looking up sheep facts for this sheep essay. I just had to say this one because I thought it was so random when I saw it, that in the 1600s, England declared it illegal to import sheep to America to gain supremacy in wool clothing production. Violation of the law was punishable by cutting off the person's hand.
See, I want to be a bandit too, so that's why I'm getting sheep.
Wool clothing supremacy.
So... the other the other thing I really have to think about is what kind of sheep I want. I know I want dairy, but typically sheep have four possible resources. 1, wool, obviously. 2, milk. 3, meat. And the fourth one is to maintain like breeding stock, and heritage sheep is what they're called. So to maintain like a line of a species of sheep. So I have to kind of decide, like, obviously number 1 is milk, but you usually get 2 for 1 out of a sheep. You can't really get more than 2 because then they're all kind of weak. So like the wool's okay, but no one's going to buy that because it's a lower quality because it's just average. And the milk, they don't produce as much. And the meat is not as tender. That's kind of the idea. But yeah, you can get like grants and everything for having heritage lines. And so I have to decide that. I really want the super cute sheep from Scotland. Like, they're called like the cutest sheep, and they really are. And I just want them really badly for no reason. I just want them to have them and to look at them.
Are they good for anything?
Not really. they're like one of the middle ground ones where they're not bad at anything, but that also means they're not great at anything. And so a lot of people in Scotland that started breeding them, because they're from New Zealand specifically, sell the lambs as like gifts and stuff. Like, people keep them as pets because they're so friggin' adorable.
Can you have different kinds of sheep?
Yeah.
Like, they'll be fine. They won't, like... I mean, I guess they're prey. They're not predators, but, like, they won't attack each other or anything.
You usually don't have a ram. Or you just have one. Typically, you'll contact, like, another farmer who specifically has ram for breeding. And so, essentially, you have nothing but females, and they tend to flock. So then they all get along. They're not very territorial or aggressive in that way. Even the ram, it's only to a degree or during certain periods. It's the goats that are gonna fuck your life up.
The mating season.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to be fair, you don't mess with anything during mating season.
No, that's what Don't Starve taught me, you know.
Okay, I have one other fact that I'm going to put out there, just because I looked at this several times, and while I do understand what this says, I just feel like every time I've looked at this, I'd be like, I feel like this is an alien language. But it's basically just the description of what sheeps are. So this is, I think, the Wikipedia, like, what sheeps are. Sheep are quadrupedal ruminant mammals, typically kept as livestock. Like all ruminants, sheeps are members of the order Ardeclia, the even-toed ungulates. Even though the name sheep applies to many species in the genus Ovis, in everyday usage, it almost always refers to Ovis aries. And I'm like, there's so many words in there where I'm like,
yeah, a lot of words.
I can get through it, but it feels like you're speaking an alien language
some
to me.
dark Latin.